Welcome to everyone. Welcome to our panelists. Thank you for participating today and giving us your time, Dr. Noland, Dr. Hurley. So we'll just get going as we are. So first I want to thank and introduce Dr. Brian Noland, who's the president at East Tennessee State University. He's the 9th president, appointed in 2012. And under his leadership, ETSU has launched the largest volume of capital projects in its history, including the Martin Center for the Arts, Green Stadium, and major academic building renovations. He has ETSU focused on regional service and launched Over Mountain Recovery, the region's only full comprehensive treatment and addiction recovery center. And in 2019, launched the campaign for ETSU, $125 million capital campaign. And according to Dick Sander, one thing he will go down for is his best decision or hire in his career, maybe hiring Dick Sander. That's a quote from Doc Sanders. So we know that's true. But thank you, as Doc said, Dr. Noland, for supporting this program and allowing us to learn and grow together. So really appreciate it. Also with us today is Dr. James Hurley. He's the president at Tarleton State University. He's the 16th president and launched Tarleton Forward 2030, our future-focused strategic plan. The class of 2024 is the largest, most diverse class they've had, an all-time high enrollment, both undergraduate and graduate program. And in 2019, he advanced their athletic program to NCAA Division I status in the Western Athletic Conference, and with instrumental league expansion, as well as reestablishing FCS football in the WAC. And in doing my preparation, Dr. Hurley, we're going to talk about many topics, one of which is the search process. You and I have hired the same women's basketball coach, and Joanna Burnby McNamee, she was at Pikeville. We hired her at UAlbany. She's now the head coach at Boston College. So clearly you're a man with eye for talent. So wanted to say welcome to you both. So we'll kick it off. I'm going to ask this question of both panelists, and maybe we'll start with your response, Dr. Noland. Just talk a little bit about your involvement in athletics generally and how you evaluate athletic directors.
Well, Mark, thank you. And I want to make sure everyone can hear me okay with the mic. Great. Well, Mark, thank you. And good morning to all the individuals who are participating in today's TopConnect event. Thank you for the investment that you're making in yourselves, in your future, and in your institution. That investment will pay itself forward in multiple ways in the months and years to come. So the question is my involvement in the athletic department, and how do I kind of navigate issues on the academic and athletic terrain. I have been very involved in athletics at the institution since I became president in 2012. Realized early on that athletics was the front porch to the institution. It was the element that brought alumni, donor engagement with the university. And in 2012, recognized that we as a university were not altogether positioned where we needed to be. Our athletic programs were competitive, but they were not at a level that you would expect for an institution with 15,000 students, med school, et cetera. So as you mentioned, the best hire, and that's arguable, but the best hire I made was to bring Dr. Sander in as our athletic director. Doc led the institution through a process of strategic visioning. We returned football to the university. The institution had closed its program in the early 2000s. So we launched football, built the stadium, changed conferences, and really positioned ETSU to be in a different position with respect to that front porch. We've led the league in attendance for basketball, football, basketball on both the men's and women's side for the better part of the past 6 years in our league. Donations to the department are all-time high, but I think most importantly, from Olympic programs all the way to the programs that garner the attention, all have performed well, both in the classroom and on the playing field. And I've just got a few simple rules that I convey to our department every year at the Welcome Back for Coaches to launch the start of the fall. Represent the university with class, excel in the classroom, play by the rules, and win championships. If you can do those 4 things in that order, then the year will go well. But if there's a variance in one of those 4 elements, and usually we have some challenges, which we can talk about later. But from my perspective, to wrap it back up, because I know you've got the same question from President Hurley, I view athletics as the front porch of the university.
Great, thank you, Dr. Noland. We'll turn to you, Dr. Hurley.
Yeah, I want to concur with Dr. Noland and commend each of you for participating in this program. I think it's incredibly important for each of you to develop yourself and prepare yourself. I mean, that's part of the mantra for TopConnect. And I think for all of you, you're entering a time where there's going to be tremendous opportunity. And we all know as the baby boom generation, if you will, continues to retire, both at the presidency, at the provost, at the dean, at the athletic director's positions, you're going to have incredible opportunities to lead institutions. And so I think being part of these types of programs are really, really important. And I want to commend Doc Sander for his leadership and foresight in creating this opportunity. I too, like Dr. Noland, I am heavily involved in athletics because it is the front porch. And for us, we often joke, now with what's going on with web presence, social media, that's certainly the front lawn, right? And then the front porch. But for us at Tarleton, as we transition into Division I, we just completed our first season. So imagine going through COVID, but also going through COVID during your first year of NCAA Division I transition, which was just hectic in its own right. We view it as not only the front porch, but the front door now, because it's created opportunities for us that we hoped and anticipated would occur through the transition. We're in a unique position where we are one of the top 5 fastest growing public universities in the country. And we're in a part of Texas where we're somewhat rural, but the Metroplex, Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington, is starting to creep into Stephenville. And so we've had to balance this tremendous growth on the university side with raising the institutional profile. And we felt like Division I athletics was a perfect way to do that. So as president during the transition, we're heavily involved. We meet monthly with the WAC director, our commissioner, but also the individual in the WAC office that serves as our liaison between us and the NCAA. But we also have an NCAA vice president that serves as our liaison. And so quarterly, we're on calls, we're on Zooms. I meet weekly with my athletic director to ensure that everything that we're doing is in lockstep with the 4-year transitional plan that was established by the university, approved by the WAC, and then ultimately the NCAA Division I Council. So for us, it's a little different. My involvement in athletics is kind of at that have-to stage, but I really enjoy it. I was a former student athlete, and so that was my way of making it out of the coal fields of East Kentucky. I grew up as a first-generation poverty student, and so athletics and academics provided a platform for me to be speaking to all of you today. So my wife and I were both athletes, so we are heavily involved with supporting our coaches, but more importantly, supporting the student athletes.
Great, thank you. So for this next question, Dr. Noland, can you talk about the expectations you have of the culture within the athletic department?
I think as you look at the dynamic landscape that's confronting athletic departments all across the country, the uncertainty is beyond description, from the continued evolution of NIL. We just recently had the Supreme Court case, which I know all of our legal departments across each of the participating institutions are digesting. The landscape is constantly in flux, and we're working within an umbrella in which the NCAA is putting significant scrutiny on those things for which they have historically controlled, but in many respects are letting the reins loose on things in this emergent territory like NIL. So as I look at the expectations for the athletic department going into this fall, compliance is going to be front and center. How can we ensure that we as a university remain within the bounds of compliance for the NCAA to the best of our ability? How do we position ourselves so that we are in compliance with legislation that has been passed in the state of Tennessee around NIL? And then how do we ensure that we as an institution are doing all that we can to support the needs of our student athletes in an environment in which they are wrestling with the changing NCAA expectations, the changing community expectations, but the very real dynamics of social injustice, structural racism, and the pressure that has been placed upon our student athletes coming up and out of COVID. President Hurley talked about transitioning to Division I and during COVID. I can't imagine what that was like. It was hard enough to navigate what we had at our university during COVID. But over the past year, I have received more direct emails, letters, calls, requests to meet with me from student athletes than I have in the entire 9 years that I've been president. And I think that's going to continue because of the pressure that our student athletes are under. And that pressure, I think, is only going to be magnified as we begin to learn what NIL means for each of our institutions.
Great, thanks. Maybe a follow-up question, Doctor. You talk about the increase in the number of student athletes reaching out to you and coaches in these uncertain times. How do you or do you coordinate that with your athletic director in those situations?
Well, the athletic director has to be involved in the process of negotiation, the process of adjudication, the process of review. But over the course of the past year here, we've had things that have come out of the woodwork that are just, in some respects, beyond description. Student athletes complaining about playing time to the office of the president, about coach behavior to the office of the president. For better, for worse, everything has bubbled up to me. I've joked on certain days that I'm the athletic director. But what I've navigated with our AD, who does an outstanding job, Scott Carter, is looping everything back through process. At institutions, process is critical. And I want to frame this within a non-athletic context. We're getting ready to wrap up the end of our first summer session. In the athletic field, you're going to see things that emerge there as students are getting ready to come back for practices, et cetera, that begin in July. But on the academic side of the equation, just this morning, I've received 3 emails from students about concerns that they have with their faculty members, and they're wanting me to adjust their grade so that they can navigate the close of the semester. So it's not just student athletes. I think it's students as a whole are pushing more things to the top because of open access. All of us have open lines of communication. I hold open office hours. So for better or for worse, I've created a culture where things bubble to the top, but you've got to loop your faculty, your provost, and others back into the process, or this is going to get out of control.
Great, thank you. Dr. Hurley, around culture and your transition that you're going through, talked about your expectations of the athletic department and community engagement. How important is that to the department?
Yeah, that's a great question. But I want to go back and follow up on one thing that Dr. Noland made mention of. The reason that, and I know Dr. Noland very well, he and I are close colleagues. We have a friendship beyond the presidency. We both started the presidency relatively, I think, within the same year. So I've been president 9 years. I think he just mentioned he's been president 9 years. One of the reasons that Brian Noland, and he's too modest to say this, but I will say it, the reason that he receives emails directly from students is because he's engaged and he's accessible. And students and parents love that, right? And on nights that Brian's answering emails at midnight, he questions how accessible and how engaged should I really be, right? Because they feel comfortable. And my students are the same. I mean, I want to know our student athletes and our students by first name, and when it's important for us to know their hopes, dreams, and aspirations. And so part of the reason that someone like President Noland receives those, but he's right, because of the societal changes that are occurring, athletic directors and presidents are going to be forced and faced with deeper involvement into a process of whatever that process that student athlete deems is the most important, or a student. The other thing that he didn't mention, and I think we all have to think about in terms of culture, is the new transfer policy, the one-time transfer rule. And that's going to have a tremendous impact on most all of our institutions, whether you're at a Power 5, or you're at a mid to low major institution, or you're Division II or Division III or whatever. It's going to be really, really impactful, because we're seeing an enormous amount of students that have the ability, if something doesn't go right, if President Noland and Scott Carter doesn't immediately answer an email within an hour, they're going to enter the transfer portal. And so I think that's something else in terms of culture that we have to talk through and think through, and really ensure that our coaches are deeply involved in our students beyond just the playing fields, that we're building those personal relationships, and it's more about the institution, right, and less about themselves. And that's hard because we're in a very thankless society now. And so to answer your question, I think that what we value and the culture that we place, our mantra is we're going to put the physical, the mental, the academic, and the social well-being of our student athletes above all else. And I'm only talking in the realm of athletics. That's the same for the university, but in specific for this conversation, it's student athletes. So our athletic director and our coaches, and they hear it from me time and time again, how are you investing in enhancing the culture of the institution? And it's through those four things. It's again, the physical and mental are equally important now. It's not just about playing time and the opportunities you provide student athletes on the playing fields. It's beyond the playing fields. How are we mentally ensuring that their mental health is strong, and also the academic is paramount, and then also social. How are we socially integrating the students and student athletes into our communities? We have tremendous community buy-in, and we have tremendous community support. Now, I wish that it was across the board for all sports like it is in football in Texas, and we're working on that. But it's that community beyond what we're trying to build is unilateral support for our student athletes, besides just showing up and cheering our football team on Saturday. How can our community and our business owners and business leaders and community leaders invest themselves into these student athletes through mentoring, through internships, et cetera?
Great, thank you. And I think Dr. Noland, you had mentioned just the rapidly changing landscape, whether it's NIL, the transfer portal, Dr. Hurley referenced, the recent Supreme Court ruling. We're all feeling this COVID pinch financially with our budgets. Resources are tight, both monetarily, but also human resources. How important are cross-campus relationships from the athletic department in terms of navigating some of these new challenges that we're all facing? And I'll throw that out to either one of you.
Well, I think it's critical for us all to remember that the athletic department is just one of many departments across the institution. And one of the things that Dr. Sander and I would talk about at length during our weekly meetings was how could the athletic department integrate its activities and initiatives with other units across the campus. Your finance officer in the athletic department does not stand on his or her own. They've got to work in conjunction with the finance division of the university, legal, compliance, et cetera, so that the more athletic directors and athletic staff can build relationships across the campus, that's going to be to their betterment, both short-term as well as long-term. So if there's one thing that universities love, it's process, and part of process is committee engagement. So take the opportunity as young leaders to get involved in the life of the institution above and beyond the department. Serve on committees related to community engagement, service learning, outreach. If there are opportunities to serve on search committees on the academic side of the house, I think that's going to benefit you down the line, because the athletic department is part of the institution, and the institution is the umbrella that provides the support both on good days as well as bad. So as I've watched and listened and learned from Dr. Sander, I think one of his great strengths is his ability to see across systems and organizations, and to ensure that his staff, when he was RAD and our current athletic director has carried this forward, remains involved within the institution, not just involved within the department.
Great, thank you. All right, let's talk about the search process, one that we all love. It's an intense, round-the-clock process. Often it should be a lot of fun too, as we're trying to identify a new leader in basketball or football. And I'm going to ask you each to kind of give your perspectives, because as we all know, searches are different from period to period. So even if it's a men's basketball search that you did 4 years ago and now you're doing another one, the circumstances may change. From sport to sport, you handle it differently, whether it's basketball, football, a non-revenue sport like lacrosse, for example. So let's start with you, Dr. Hurley. Talk about any recent searches, and a little bit about your involvement in it. When do you like to get involved? Is it on the front end? When do you like updates? Do you use a search firm or not? What qualities you're looking for? Just whatever you'd like to share about your role in some of the searches you've been involved with.
Yeah, good question. And Mark, jokingly at the outset of this conversation and Zoom session, he and I have had the luxury of coaching Joanna McElvey, and she makes ADs and presidents look really great. I will tell you though, Mark, you were the benefactor of us giving her an opportunity after she had been out of, and I want to paint this picture because I think it's important for these aspiring ADs to hear, since you mentioned her story. And really quickly, and Mark knows this, I took a chance on a coach, the athletic director and I, but he brought two finalists to me. Well, we had three finalists, but we had two outstanding finalists. And one of the individuals was Joanna. And she had been out of coaching for almost 4 years. I think it was roughly 3.5 years. And she was out of coaching to be a mom. And she had a young family. And she knew that the importance of getting her children off to a solid foundation, that was very, very important to her. But she, in doing so, took a 4-year break from recruiting, from having the AAU connections and all the things that are very important in this day and age. But she had a tremendous passion, and for me, it's all about values. We want to hire individuals that have the values of the institution and understands the culture of the institution that you're in. Now, fast forward, we just hired a coach in men's basketball, and some people would say that it was somewhat of a controversial hire, and that was Billy Gillespie. And certainly, if you look at Coach Gillespie's track record, and he will admittedly tell every one of you, and he's someone I think down the road you should consider adding to one of these sessions, because he has a tremendous turnaround story. Billy will tell you he was an alcoholic, and he had an addiction to alcohol, and it tarnished his coaching legacy and his inability to function at a very high level. Billy's been clean for nearly 5 years now. Obviously, a lot of folks have read he's had a kidney transplant. And Billy and I, through the course of the interview process, he and I spent 3 hours on the president's back porch, literally talking about the importance of values and culture and building relationships with not only his players and his coaching staff, but the community. And I told him, I said, Billy, this is going to be the most difficult job you've ever had, even more so than coaching the University of Kentucky. And I grew up in Kentucky, so I know the enormous pressures put on God and the basketball coach of the University of Kentucky. And he understood that, because we're going through a transition. It's really hard to recruit student athletes when we have no prospect of playing for an NCAA championship for 4 years, right? That's really tough to sell. But you have to look beyond a person's past, or you even have to you have to take a deep dive in where are they now? And that was the same for Joanna in a very different circumstance. That ended up being a great hire. And I think Coach Gillespie is going to be a great hire, because we went 10-10 in our first year. We were predicted to finish dead last in the WAC conference, and we finished in the middle of the pack. And it's because of his tremendous ability to coach. But it goes back to that culture. Every coach that you hire, they have to understand your culture at your institution, and you have to clearly outlay the expectations that you expect from all of your coaches. And so for me, the process is the AD brings 3 finalists to me, and my wife and I always have dinner with the candidate and their spouse, if they have a spouse, or just the candidate. And that gives us an opportunity to really find out more information about who they are as an individual, less as a coach, because we trust that the athletic directors have vetted their ability to coach. I'm more concerned about how will they value being part of the Tarleton family, and how will they enhance the lives of our student athletes.
Great, I appreciate that. And the good point about the culture. And I think if your culture is right, you're going to be on the same page with your athletic director in terms of the type of person you're looking for. But let me just ask a follow-up to you, Dr. Hurley, and I'll turn to you, Dr. Noland. On the front end of the search, how important is it or not that you have a conversation with your AD about just, who are we looking for? What's the type of person we're looking for? What's the type of background? And do you get involved at that early stage of the process?
Absolutely, we do. And that's very fair, Mark. That's a great point. So I don't totally allow the AD to go out blind and just find 3 individuals and bring them back. And I doubt very few presidents in the country in this day and age. 20 years ago, that was the place, right? I mean, 8 presidents very seldom were involved, and unless you're at a handful of institutions across the country. Athletics plays such an integral role. Just like this COVID, I want to follow up quickly to something that Dr. Noland mentioned. Think about how the student athletes shape the culture on all of our campuses. We all use student athletes to propagate campaigns for social distancing awareness, wearing a face mask. When it was a struggle to get our non-student athletes to wear the face mask, we used our student athletes to help say, hey, we want to play and you want to watch us play. So we need help. We all have to unify and join together and make this happen. And I bet you most all institutions across the country did the same thing, because your student athletes have tremendous influence on your campuses. And so through COVID, that's how our student athletes helped shape our culture. And we had a very successful navigation of COVID because of the help of our coaches and our student athletes.
Great, thank you. Dr. Noland, any recent search or search in the past that sticks out in particular you'd like to share in your involvement there?
But Mark, I want to first answer a couple questions around process and structure. With respect to my involvement in developing the process and structure for searches, I've found it's important for the president to be involved in both of those dynamics from day one. So if there is, for example, a vacancy in your women's softball program, I'm going to sit down and meet with the athletic director as soon as that vacancy becomes available to walk through the process that we're going to utilize to fill the position, and then the structure that will help shape and inform that process. Typically what transpires is after that initial meeting where we walk through characteristics, expectations, the things we're looking for in a candidate, the AD is going to bring me a list of about 10 names. Quite often I'll add to that list or adjust the list, but we'll settle in on a group of 10 that will then go through a formal review structure with. We'll then winnow that down to 5. Those 5 in a Zoom environment, we would hold Zoom meetings with. We would then narrow that down to the candidate, and then we move through that process of being deeply involved from a presidential perspective in the negotiations, in the interview, and in the vetting. We also went through a startup similar to what President Hurley mentioned. When Dr. Sander and I made the decision about 8 years ago to start football at the university, we were in a very unique position. We didn't own a football, nor did we own a helmet or a shoulder pad, nor did we have a stadium. So we were recruiting a coach to come to the institution on a wing and a prayer, a coach who had the opportunity to recruit every single student athlete, to design the uniforms, but most importantly, to build a culture. So we wanted to find a candidate who had the same set of values we did, values focused on family, on playing by the rules, representing the university with class, and winning championships. And we found a coach with experience, a coach, Carl Torbush, who was our head football coach. He came and sat in my office during the interview process and asked me a question around what was I looking for. And I said, well, coach, I'm looking for someone who can build a culture, because the cultural foundation that we establish is going to shape the direction of this program for the next decade. We can win quickly with a lot of transfers, or we can slowly and methodically do it the right way. I'm interested in doing it the right way. And he smiled and said, well, Dr. Noland, in my life, I've never had a chance to build culture. I've had to change culture. I've had to correct culture. I've had to disrupt culture, but I've never had the chance to build it. And when he said that in his own unique way, Dr. Sander and I just kind of smiled, because we knew we'd found the right person. And over a 5-year time period, we bought football helmets. We played our first 2 seasons at a high school stadium while we were waiting on our stadium to be built. But by year 5, we won a Southern Conference championship, and we were in the FCS tournament. all because we had built it the right way. Now let's look at a couple of other searches. I was doing a little prep and realized I'm now in a position where every single coach at the institution, I've had the opportunity to play a role in hiring, from the golf coach to the tennis coach to the basketball coach. We're a Division I institution, but we're in many respects a place that gives people a chance. And if they succeed, then they have the opportunity to stay at our university and become an icon, or spread their wings and pursue dreams at larger institutions. And we've had coaches who've done both. We've had a golf coach who spent more than 25 years at the institution, put us in a position where we were nationally ranked year after year, competitive and repetitive appearances in the NCAA tournament. We've had basketball coaches who've won and who've moved on to what they felt were greener pastures. But our job as leaders is to provide an environment in which people have the opportunity to be successful and to realize their dreams, be they coaches or players. And then from there, doors will open. So I am very involved in the process. We've just completed 2 basketball coaching searches on the men's side and the women's side. I was involved in every Zoom interview, intimately involved in the decision around the finalist, because at our institution, those are the 2 programs that garner significant attention. We've had significant success. And as a donor once told me, if your basketball team's winning games, it's kind of like President Hurley's comment on God and the basketball coach at Kentucky. It's similar here at East Tennessee State University.
Great, thank you. President Hurley, staying with the search process and realizing it's different by sport maybe and from time to time, talk about a decision to either engage a search firm or not, if you've had experience on that side.
Yeah, absolutely. We have not used a search firm for specific coaches during my presidency. And part of it is budget. Part of it is, I believe, if you have a competent athletic director and you're confident in your university and the culture, back to what Dr. Noland alluded to, you have a solid athletic foundation. I think that I place tremendous value in the athletic director, first and foremost. I'm less involved in the initial stages as Dr. Noland. Now, I want to preface that. If our football coach were to retire or leave tomorrow, I can assure you, for proprietary reasons, I would be involved from step 1 until the very last step, because in the Texas A&M system and in the state of Texas, as I know some of our audience members are from the great state of Texas, football is king and football matters at Tarleton. It funds, outside of our men's and women's basketball programs, it funds every other sport, much like the other aspiring ADs on this call. So for us, football has to be really good. For Dr. Noland, I know it's basketball. So I am less interested in using a firm if we feel like that our athletic director has the connections and the ability to do so. For example, we just completed our search for our inaugural women's soccer coach. We've never offered women's soccer as a sanctioned sport at Tarleton. We have club soccer, but not intercollegiate athletic soccer. And we thought about using a firm, and the athletic director, my CFO, and we talked through it, and we wanted to. So I took the stance that we wanted to try to launch a search first. If it was a failed search, we didn't garner the type of applicants, then we would turn to a search firm, and that's okay. A lot of institutions do that with presidencies. Or provost roles, right? They'll launch themselves. If they don't quite get the pool, then they'll turn to additional help or outside help. We were blessed that we were able to hire the head coach at the University of Wyoming, who played soccer at TCU, and his wife's from the area, and we were able to attract him and kind of poach him from that conference and from that institution to start our program. And he's 3-time Big Sky Coach of the Year, et cetera. And that's because I place tremendous value in the athletic director and trust in going out and building a pool. So I'm less involved in the initial stage and more heavily involved once it comes down to those final 3. I have a rule of 3. I want in any role, provost, dean, head coach, AD, whatever. I like the rule of 3. I want 3 options, 3 individuals to look at the end of the process.
Great, thank you. And maybe one of the last points on, and you can each take this on the search process, and I'll turn to you, Dr. Noland. You touched on it briefly with Coach Torbush. You knew, at what point do you, or signals do you get that you have the right fit in a candidate? Is it different from time to time? Is it just alignment with your core values and your culture? Is there anything you can share with us along those lines about how and when do you know you have the right fit?
I think part of the ability to ensure you have the right fit is a structure of the due diligence process that's entailed within the search. So as your athletic director is looking for individuals to fill a vacancy, they know the values that you as an institution hold. East Tennessee State University is not the University of Tennessee. We're a blue collar school. Our resources are significantly different than that of Knoxville. So we're looking for individuals with a blue collar background, someone who is willing to do the little things, to put in the extra effort, and to ensure that you as an institution have the ability to compete against the University of Tennessee, even though you may not have the same resources. And from baseball to basketball, any sport outside of football, on the playing field, we have been able to compete well against that institution and other Power 5 conferences, because we've built the values of doing things the right way, playing by the rules, representing the university with class, and winning championships. So looking for individuals with those values and that background. I think one of my favorite interviews and a search process that I still look back at fondly was the search that brought Steve Forbes to East Tennessee State University. Dr. Sander and I had a list of 10 folks that we had vetted, and we began to assess the strengths and weaknesses of those individuals. And he kept bringing us back to Coach Forbes, someone from a small town in Iowa who had coached at a junior college level, who had put in his time throughout his career to build a base, but to build a base from a recruiting perspective, to build a base from a support perspective, and to build a base from a networking perspective. So I was at a conference in Washington, and Doc called me and said, "Hey, Dr. Noland, if we want to interview Coach Forbes, we need to get out to Wichita. Can you be in Wichita in 2 days?" And I said, "Well, Doc, I can get to Wichita, but I need you to take care of all the logistics." So I thank you for indulging me as I quickly tell the story. So never been to Wichita before. I fly, land in the airport. Doc picks me up, and he picks me up in this tan Toyota pickup truck that it looks like it had been out in the oil fields of Oklahoma, covered in dirt and dust. And we go to practice and meet with Coach Forbes. After practice, he says, "Well, hey, let's just go to dinner. I can ride with you all." And we're like, "No, you're not riding with us." So we meet at dinner, and about halfway through dinner, I turned to Doc and smile. And we both realized we'd found the right person, a person who was humble, a sense of honesty, a sense of integrity, but someone who was willing to put in the work. And you're not going to know that unless you meet with them in person. So I know we're in an environment in which Zoom has dominated our lives for 16 months, but there's something really important, as President Hurley mentioned, about having his coaches over for dinner, about sitting across the table and having a conversation with the coach and ensuring that it's the right fit. From Desmond Oliver, our new basketball coach, to Simon Harris, we have hired coaches with blue collar backgrounds who are willing to put in the work, and it has on average worked well for us.
Great thing. That's a great answer. Brings. I know I said that would be the last question on the search, but that story. We're talking about process, and everyone wants a process to go a certain way from A to Z. And I know we're going to talk. I'm on a panel tomorrow about this, but from your perspective, I think it's great that you were able to basically Doc convince you to change your schedule to conform to the speed or the process of the search. So, and we had a similar situation here this year. But Dr. Hurley, given that processes, people think of them as so rigid, how important is flexibility? That's a great example Dr. Noland just gave, because these things can go in many different directions, very quickly.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's incredibly important to be flexible and to have an open mind. The one thing I will challenge all of these budding future ADs to consider, always have student athletes involved. We do. So every institution that I have led, we've always had students involved, whether it's the strategic plan, whether it's hiring a dean, whether it's hiring a vice president. And our athletic director, they never used this process at Tarleton until I arrived. And every coach search that we've had some of our former student athletes or current student athletes involved in the process. And that's really important because they share a perspective that sometimes we forget about. And I want to go back to that culture, Mark, you mentioned. It's so important. And you heard the story that I shared of the two candidates, Joanna and Coach Gillespie. But what I left out, both of those individuals understood culture because they're from the region. Joanna's family lived in Pikeville, Kentucky. So she met her husband, I think, an hour and a half in West Virginia. They visited Pikeville a lot. She knew what she was getting into. Coach Gillespie was raised 45 minutes from our campus. He was coaching Ranger Junior College 30 miles down the road. So no one understood our culture more than those two individuals. And so sometimes you get beyond the X's and O's, just like Dr. Noland. He hired Steve Forbes, and that was a tremendous hire because of culture. He grew up in an area that looked like Johnson City, Tennessee. And so that cultural fit really matters. So Mark, I believe what you alluded to about the flexibility, you can't be so rigid that you get outside the box, because I think the really great coaches have been out of the box hires.
And if I could follow up there in terms of process, we have provided latitude to the athletic department to hire individuals through a process that is expedited in an atypical manner from university hires in general. So most university hiring processes will involve a formal search committee. It takes time for that search committee to come together, to interview candidates, and to make a final decision. If there's a university search for a typical position that can be completed in more than 60 days, I'd like to see it. If you wait 60 days to hire a head men's basketball coach, you missed all your candidates. This round, we hired our head men's basketball coach in 4 days because we knew who we were interested in before the search ever began, and we went and got our man. If you know who you want, and go get the search done, because if not, another institution is going to beat you to the punch. So in short, this goes back to my comment around why athletic staff need to be involved across the institution. We're able to move in that manner because our HR department, our legal division, and others has faith and confidence in the department. They've provided the latitude for them to run searches in an expedited manner. So once again, it goes back to the importance of the athletic department as part of the university as a whole, even though sometimes it needs to have greater flexibility than you would have if you were hiring a university provost, for example.
No, that's great. Thank you. And then we'll move off search, but just a plug for TopConnect, having gone through a search very similar to the one that you all went through at East Tennessee State. I can't thank Doc and you, Dr. for allowing me to be part of TopConnect, because it really helped prepare us here at University to move swiftly and have a really good pool of people that we already were interested in. So thanks for sharing that. So let's move on to a very important topic of communication with your athletic director. There's all different forms. I know we probably all have regularly scheduled meetings. I think, Dr. Hurley, you mentioned you have a weekly meeting with your athletic director. So I'm going to ask each of you, because everyone has different styles and no one way is the right way. It's the right way for you. Talk a little bit about your expectations, the form of communications, both formal, informal, frequency, et cetera, that you go through. And I'll start with you, Dr. Hurley.
Yes. And so once again, I do meet with my athletic director weekly. Part of the necessity is the transition. We have monthly NCAA and WAC reports that we have to certify and sign off and submit. And so that's arduous in its own right. But also, I think it's really important that as you become an athletic director, you have that relationship with your president. My golden rule at the institution is I don't want to be surprised. I don't want to read about something in the school newspaper. I don't want to read something on Twitter or Instagram that I'm not aware of. And so my AD is excellent at just sending me quick text, because I can't step out of every meeting and take every call. Hey, call me this evening, I need to discuss. Or Mr. Reisman will send me a text and say, hey, the heads up, Brian Noland entered the basketball transfer portal today. Just things that I need to know that are really important. So if I do get that call from the donor or athletic supporter or Chancellor Sharp or whomever, that I'm prepared to answer. So never allow, the golden rule I'm going to teach each of you today, never allow the boss to be surprised. And we all have bosses, right? I never allow Chancellor Sharp to be surprised, even though he has 11 institutions and 8 state agencies that he leads. He doesn't want to be surprised. And I would say that's a really important rule. Also, have that open communication and build that relationship with your president, where you can have those candid, really tough conversations in a really safe environment and manner. Know that not all days you're going to win championships. And to get to the championship goal or line, if you will, there are going to be bumps in the road. And together you need to navigate those bumps. The other thing that I share with my AD is allow me to help you navigate through some of those bumps. So don't put yourself on an athletic island and think as the AD that you have to figure it out because you're incompetent if you can't. And you want to keep things from the president because you don't want to be perceived as incompetent. That's not the case. Presidents don't look at it as that. We want to be involved, we want to be helpful, but we want to ensure success. And so that's really important, having that open communication. And I agree with Dr. Noland. I look forward to when TopConnect is having face-to-face seminars and meetings again, right? We're almost there. And I think for a lot of states, we are there. But that open communication, never allowing your boss, the president, the chancellor, whomever you report to be surprised. That will go far for you.
Great, thank you. That absolutely is the golden rule. I think for all of us. I had our president, Dr. Rodriguez, was when he was hired, transitioning in, and I think the first 3 calls I had with him were all, hey, heads up on this not so good situation that's going to happen. And I remember feeling like, gosh, man, I hate every communication to be just about a problem, which we learned there's lots of problems. But he was great, and I said, I promise you, one day I'm going to text you with just to say hi and get in. But we had to get through that.
But that's important, Mark, and I'm glad you shared that, because I can tell you, presidents, we want those calls. We value those calls, and we value our athletic directors more so when they do those types of things and call with the really bad information, because we know that that's an AD that can be trusted.
Dr. Noland, anything you'd like to share on your style of communication?
Well, likewise, no surprises to say the least, but I want to zero in on a word that you've used on a couple of occasions here, and that's call. Many of us work at public universities. We work in an environment in which every single word that goes into an email or a text is subject to FOIA. So I would encourage athletic directors to remember to pick up the phone and call, or to walk across campus and have that conversation, because there will be a circumstance or a situation in your career in which the press is going to have some interest in the operations of the institution, and your emails will be subject to FOIA. That has happened to me on multiple occasions in the past 12 months, where every email that I wrote, emails to my administrative assistant to emails to the athletic director, were all subject to FOIA. So if you've got a sensitive matter to discuss, pick up the phone. On the point of no surprises and open lines of communication, once again, to have a little bit of fun at Dr. Sanders' expense, he and I both have a common love of basketball. The difference is he's very talented. I lack in talent, what I make up for in a willingness to try. So quite often, Doc and I would just shoot free throws, and we would get more business accomplished as we shot free throws than we did anything else. So it could be golf, it could be lunch, you name the setting, but as athletic directors, get to know your presidents as individuals. Don't just simply look at them as someone that you've got to report to, but build a relationship with them that goes above and beyond the workplace, because that relationship is going to benefit you both on good days as well as challenging days.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead, Doc.
Mark, can I go ahead and say something? Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important, is to develop that relationship. And, you know, President Noland and I, through, you know, shooting ball, you know, just kind of being together, we developed this incredible trust. You know, I trusted anything that he said, and I think he trusted anything that I said. And it's because, you know, we had that ability to genuinely communicate, you know, and I think that's so important. You know, we would talk about a lot of different things, and I think as you do that, you really get to know, you know, the president as an individual. And I know sometimes people are a little bit hesitant to kind of share that, but if you can develop that relationship, it is incredibly important, you know, because I think we got so much accomplished because there was, you know, we had developed this really, really great, you know, great relationship. So I would encourage everybody to do that exactly. And like he said, we kind of do it because of basketball, but, you know, I'd kid him about the Wizards, you know. And
they're the Washington Bullets, Doc. They're not the Wizards.
There you go. Yeah, and how horrible they were. I said, you know, I hope you're a whole lot better of recruiting teachers and deans and vice presidents than the Bullets were in recruiting players, because they weren't very good. So we really kind of had that relationship to joke about things like that. But I mean, I think that'll really help you down the road. And you know, but also I'm sure y'all got questions for Dr. Noland or Dr. Hurley. So go ahead. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got one in the queue that we'll turn to. But before we leave this topic of relationships, I forgot Dr. Noland and I share the same hometown area of the Washington, D.C. metro area, and it is the Bullets. And I had the privilege of one of the people that reached out to me on our coaching, men's basketball coach that we just hired was DJ Bickerstaff, the coach of the Cleveland. And I said, oh man, I love the Bullets. He said, oh, I can't wait to call my dad Bernie and tell him that I got another Bullets fan. So I'm with you. It's the Bullets. Let's see. We have a question. I hope I get the last name correct. Tyler Kai from Tulane, Green Wave has a question.
Yes, thanks, Mark. My question is, you know, specifically probably for Dr. Hurley, but Dr. Noland, if you can comment as well, I'd welcome it. Really, as Dr. Hurley, as you're transitioning from Division II to Division I, institutional priority as well as institutional alignment was probably very important to articulate that out to the rest of the campus community, your other deans and directors. Can you talk about the philosophy you had as you partnered with the athletics department to go from Division II to Division I, which is a significant enhancement to the student athlete experience?
Yes, thanks, Tyler, for the question. We knew having unilateral buy-in was incredibly important on the outset of the process. Thankfully for me, when I became president in July of 2019, the institution had completed about a year prior to a strategic study and whether or not this made sense for the institution as a whole, not just athletically. And we had multiple conferences that they reviewed, the Southland, the WAC, the Big Sky. I mean, we had an array of, I think even the ASUN, we had like four conferences. What does Tarleton's alignment look like in those conferences? And the dialogue had been started by the previous president, but he also knew that he was retiring and he didn't want to go through that process. He knew it was a 4 to 5 year transition. We also needed a new strategic plan because we were facing SAC-COC 10-year reaffirmation. So all those things I walked into in year one, and then COVID struck. But we knew once I was able to review the study and spend time with our faculty and our staff, they really bought in. But it was important, Tyler. I went to every single college and every non-academic unit on the campus, and I personally met with all members of campus. We had student forums. Our students had to pass a referendum. a self-imposed student fee. We already had a fee, but we had to increase that fee significantly for us to make the transition. And that fee passed by, I think it was 72%. And we're nearly 16,000 students. So we're not, a small number. I mean, this was a large number of graduate and undergraduate students that took part in this vote. And so we had overwhelming support. And I would say we had 95% faculty support. You're always going to have that 5 to 10% that just whatever you're proposing, it's just not the way forward. And let's go back to 1978 and let's live in those days. And the staff side was even higher. Our staff was incredibly excited because they knew what it would do, and our faculty knew what it would do. And it has. We've enhanced our research portfolio by over 20% just in my 3 years. And a lot of that is attributed to the mindset that we're now a Division I R2 institution. And we need to act like, a Carnegie R2 Division I institution. But yes, that buy-in was incredibly important. And I personally, as president, I went some without my AD, some with my AD to these meetings to ensure that they could ask the open, tough questions that I needed to answer. In Texas, you can't use state support to support athletics. So that was a pretty easy answer in terms of no, we're not going to diminish the investment into the academy or the academic enterprise for this endeavor. I know that's a very long answer to your question, but that buy-in was really important. And now we're into year 2. It just feels like we've been Division I for forever, in large part because Tarleton for the last 10 years has really operated athletically at a Division I level. So that helped. That made it incredibly easy in terms of navigating the waters.
Tremendous. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Tom.
you. All right, we're coming up. We got about 5 more minutes. I made my first mistake of the day. I'm surprised it took this so long. I thought we were going a little later. So we have one more question, and I hope to have just a brief minute for each of you for a parting comment, if you'd like. So JP has a question. Your name got cut off of my chat, so I can't see that. So JP, please ask your question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. JP Abercrombie from Rice University. So Dr. Hurley, not too far away, still in the great state of Texas. My question is for both of you. First, thank you for sharing everything that you've had this morning. You both touched on culture, your people, and the importance particularly of one sport or a couple sports on your campus. My question is, how do you ensure, or what strategies do you use to make sure that all of your student athletes feel valued and actually are valued, even though you rely on one specific sport, especially with the 50th anniversary of Title IX coming up next year?
Dr. Noland?
I'll jump in quickly. I think one of the things that students want to see is that the engagement of senior administration, their colleagues and their peers across the campus in their respective area of interest. So if I'm a student in the theater department, I want to see my colleagues, the administration, and fellow students at my plays and performances. Likewise for student athletes. So I do my best to ensure that on multiple occasions throughout the season that I attend softball games, baseball games, volleyball games, golf and tennis matches, because I want students to know that I'm present and that I'm paying attention, and I ask likewise of other members of senior administration. Our athletic department does a wonderful job of supporting one another. And you'll see at many events, some of the most vocal members of the crowd are fellow student athletes cheering on their peers. So if you, by design, hire coaches who share the values of the university, and those values entail a focus on family, a focus on unity, a focus on moving towards shared objectives, then that's going to help impact this as much as anything else. Ensuring that you have an equitable level of funding and support so that all programs are rising together rather than one program being pitted against another. I'm familiar with universities in which you have a program that's placed on a pedestal and that quickly creates problems across the department. So it's not possible to be 100% egalitarian, but we have worked hard at our institution to create a culture in which all departments, be it the badminton program or the basket weaving program, all realize that there are interwoven elements of a larger purpose.
Yeah, I'll just add to that quickly, JP. Thanks for the question. I think it's an important question. One of the things that Kendall and I do, in addition to what Dr. Noland just alluded to, my wife and I are really involved in, and I know Brian and his wife are too, because we're friends and we share ideas. Sometimes the president can't be at every event, and so you have to divide and conquer. And so sometimes Kendall will go to the baseball game, and I'll go to the softball game, or I will go to the Performing Arts Center to watch a senior recital or a senior art exhibit. And then she'll do something opposite. But when we can, we collectively go together. But here's something that I want you to really think about. Kendall and I, for the last, 5 years of our presidency, and we learned this from another president, we have every single senior, before they leave Tarleton, if they have performed a service for the institution, some type of leadership service, that's our student athletes, those are the individuals that are in the band, those are individuals that are part of our performing arts department. We have them in our home, in the Trogdon house, the president's home, for a lunch or dinner. And we always do, we take about 2.5 weeks in the fall, 2.5 weeks in the spring, and we do that. And it is a lot of work. It's a lot of dinners and lunches back to back. And I think we gain about 30 pounds during this short cycle. And we do that because we want our students to know that we care about them. And we always cap it no more than 35 at these dinners and lunches, so we can intimately get to know them a little more, and them see us as people and us see them as non-performers, whether it's student athletes, band, whatever, right? And that we just value them. And so I would, and for athletics, for example, if we have the senior members of our baseball and softball team, our athletic director comes, and so do the head coaches, and they're there. And it's just us pouring back into them and sharing our love and appreciation for their dedication to the institution and their service to the university.
Great. Well, I think what we're going to do is talking to Michael's. It's time for us now to transition out of respect for our next panelist. I can say that Dr. Noland, Dr. Hurley, thank you for your time. Commitment virtual class. I wish we could do it in person. Thank you for helping us get this session ended on time with great information. Can't thank you both enough.